Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biblical Bookworm. My name is Elizabeth, and today I'll be talking about the book Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching, which is a book I came across because the religious hippie once mentioned in one of her videos that she was reading the book, and I asked her a few days ago how she liked it, to mention her opinion in this video, and she said that somehow it got lost and she couldn't finish it. So unfortunately, I can't tell you how she liked it. I thought that it would be a good idea to summarize the book now during the summer, as this is the time when many people worry about their beach body. And so let's start with some general information. The book was published in 2014 and it was written by John Acquaviva, who has a PhD in physical education, and with time he also became interested in body image and morality in sports. Now, I would suggest that you also can watch this video and educate yourself on the problems that I mentioned there, even if you've never had body image issues or you personally have other problems than worrying about your six-pack, as someone you know might be struggling with their body image, and if you understand the problem, you might be able to help them. In this video, I'll first summarize the problem that Mr. Acquaviva describes, and then I'll talk about possible solutions. Now, first, what does caring about your look and body image have to do with God? And here the author writes that excessive dieting can actually hinder you in your relationship with God, because first, you could make your body an idol, and also if you're hungry, you can't focus that well in your prayer, and it just distracts you from God and from your spiritual life. And then the author explains how big the problem actually is. He says that about 50% of women and 33% of men suffer from some type of body image distortion, which means that they have a misperception of their body or a single body part. For example, they don't like their nose, their lips, their hands, although those body parts are completely normal looking. And there are also mental illnesses that are linked to body image distortion, for example, anorexia, where people believe that they are fat, although they are not. And another one would be bigorexia, which is not an official eating disorder, and that's something that mostly men have that work out, because it's characterized by thinking that you're small, that your muscles are small, although they're actually huge. And there's also a famous survey, which I think the author doesn't mention, but it was conducted among women between the ages of 18 and 64, and they were asked the question if they would describe themselves as beautiful. And this survey found out that only 4% of women would describe themselves as beautiful, and this survey wasn't even taking into account the insecurities of teenage girls. Now, let's get back to the book. The author writes that body image issues have little to do with how the person actually looks, as people who care most about their looks usually are even the least satisfied with it. And I'll link a video in the description where a model gives a TED talk where she explains that although she was admired for her beauty, she was actually extremely insecure about it, and she says that she had observed the same phenomenon among her colleagues. After that, the author writes about why there are actually so few people that are satisfied with how they look. And he mainly blames the beauty, fashion, and pornography industry, as those industries rely financially on the beauty competition. And for example, they want women to compete not only to look their best, but also to look better than everyone else. And for men, those industries want to either pressure women to maintain that look or to continue to operate under the illusion that all men want perfection. Then Mr. Acquaviva explains that this pressure and dissatisfaction leads people to take harmful measures. He writes, for example, that up to 11 million high school seniors have taken steroids, which can have severe side effects, especially regarding one's reproductive health. He then moves on to explain how unrealistic current beauty standards are. For example, he talks about how Barbie would look if she was a real person. So if she was a real actual woman, she would be 5'9" feet tall, which equals 175 centimeters. and her measurements in inches would be 39,1833, which equals 99,4784 centimeters. If you're a female watching this, you know that those are hardly the measurements of a human being, or at least they can only be achieved with plastic surgery. And if you're a guy, please just believe me. Then the author writes that people usually underestimate what it takes to look like a magazine model. He writes that it takes 2 to 3 hours of weight training each day, and you also can't have any fun with food, as those people have to count their proteins and calories and also have to avoid certain foods. And throughout the book, the author also presents a few questionnaires or surveys for the reader to be able to self-assess themselves whether they have body image distortion or not. Now let's get to possible solutions. The author writes that it's important to distinguish between obsessing and caring for one's body. He says that to not take care for your body is somewhere between disrespectful of God and sinful, but obsessing over it also isn't the right thing to do. He writes that the main message of the theology of the body by Saint John Paul II is that God created the human body as a sign of his own divine mystery, and the author advises us to always keep that in mind when we're looking at our own body or at the bodies of others. We should try to see that divine mystery in everybody we see. Another thing that I liked that the author did in his book was that he repeated after every chapter that if God says it's good, referring to Genesis, where God said that it's good after every creation, and in Genesis 1:31, after God created the first woman and the first man, he said that it was very good. So here the author stresses that if God created you the way you are, that's good. You are good. You are very good. Another possible solution would be what I think the author doesn't mention in the book, but I've heard the religious hippie mention in one of her videos, is to support each other and to make each other compliments, because there's a 96% chance that the woman you're giving the compliment to thinks she's ugly or below average or average looking. And maybe don't do this if you're a man, because that could be misunderstood or creepy. But if you're a father, a grandpa, a husband, a boyfriend, so in certain relationships, that is definitely a good idea. Mr. Aquaviva also writes that true peace is linked to accepting our bodies, because true peace is being in full communion with God. And being in full communion with God means accepting everything God offers us, especially our bodies. He gives the advice to shift from an aesthetic body image to a functional body image, which means that one appreciates one's body for its abilities and not for the look. So for example, you could think about what you would not be able to do if your body wasn't as functional as it is. And he adds that there is nothing wrong in appreciating physical beauty, but he advises the reader to put emphasis on the functional body image. Now let's get to my opinion on the book. I personally think that the topic of the book is very important. It's also a religious problem because, as I said at the beginning of the video, obsessing over your body can distract you from more important things, like, for example, your eternal salvation. And so it's definitely a good idea to write a book about it. But I'm not sure if the author did that in the best way possible, because, for example, he didn't deliver on the promise in the title that he would improve body image through Catholic teaching. There was actually relatively little Catholic teaching in the book. And I'm also not sure who the target audience of the book is, because I think that someone with a severe problem like an eating disorder already knows everything that he writes in his book, and someone who doesn't have body image issues wouldn't read this book in the first place. So I think maybe the only audience I would recommend this book to are parents with teenage kids or kids that will become teenagers soon, because I think that it's helpful for parents to know about this problem and to know where this problem comes from and maybe how to help the kids. And so in total, I would give the book a 6 out of 10, not because it was bad, but because I'm not sure who it was written for. That's been it for today. See you next week. God bless and bye!